This is an MJA Inc. Investigations warning. This MJA podcast is rated E for explicit. Some details of a case and language used on this podcast might be upsetting to some of our listeners. Listeners' discretion is advised. And for those who are still with us, kick back and enjoy the show. Welcome to our MJ podcast. This series, Cases from the Deep Freezer. This is episode 8, part 7, The Missing in New Hampshire. The Charlie Project has 32 people listed as missing from the state of New Hampshire. The New Hampshire Department of Justice has 112 unsolved homicides listed on their site, starting in 1968 and ending in 2015. We will profile 10 missing person cases from the state of New Hampshire. There will be 5 males and 5 females who are missing profiled on this podcast. My name is Mark. I will be your host for tonight's show. Joining me later will be our amazing co-host, Olivia. We are coming to you from Morrisonville, New York. This series, Cases from the Deep Freezer from the state of New Hampshire. The 5 missing males are: Case 1, Michael Miller. Case 2, Christopher P. Hill. Case 3, Patrick Douglas Merrill. Case 4, Reginald Leroy Butler. Case 5, Curtis Paishan. The 5 missing females are: Case 6, Dorothy Ann Boyce. Case 7, Edie Segal. Case 8, Rachel Elizabeth Garden. Case 9, Shirley Ann McBride. Case 10, Maura Murray. Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return, Olivia will be on the line. Be back in a moment. When there is an ending, there was a beginning. Every victim has a picture to paint. Every true crime has its time and place. Please join our MJ podcast, the series Deep into the Woods, Missing Persons, Unsolved Crimes, and the Does. Welcome back to our MJ podcast, this series, Cases from the Deep Freezer. This is Episode 8, Part 7, The Missing in New Hampshire. We have Olivia on the line. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well.
And these cases we are about to profile, how many of them have you heard of besides Maura Murray?
I'm going to say just one of them sounded familiar.
Okay. And to the families and friends waiting for answers concerning their loved one's case, we hope you gain what you seek. The 5 missing males from New Hampshire. Case 1. 22-year-old Michael Miller was last seen October 23, 1983, hiking on Mount Lafayette, a 5,249-foot mountain with friends. Michael becomes separated from his friends at about 4:30 p.m. after he hiked ahead of them on the Old Bridle Path Trail with the words, "Meet me at the top of the mountain." His friends waited for him at the trailhead, but eventually left. There was an unconfirmed sighting of 22-year-old Miller near the Greenleaf Hut, an Appalachian Mountain Club cabin boarded up for the winter. The hut was about a mile from the summit, which was much higher than searchers originally thought Michael Miller may have climbed. Searches by helicopters, fish and game officers, scent dogs, and climbers from the Mountain Rescue Service was called off after a week because of below freezing temperatures and hurricane-forced winds. No trace of 22-year-old Michael Miller has ever been found.
On July 30th, 1984, Christopher Hill, a principal and former school teacher from Haverhill, Massachusetts, was reported missing by his wife. The 25-year-old Hill left with a friend on a camping trip 4 days earlier. The friend, the last person to see Christopher Hill, told police he last saw Hill at D&Q Stables in Windham, New Hampshire. Christopher's 1974 Mercury Comet was found abandoned on August 3rd, 1984 at the mall in Massachusetts. Both rear tires had been deflated. Authorities say there is probable cause to think the friend was involved in Christopher Hill's disappearance, but he has not been charged in the case. Foul play is suspected in 25-year-old Christopher Hill's disappearance.
Case 3. On April 6, 1987 at 7:30 p.m., 21-year-old Patrick Merrill, a Plymouth State College student in Plymouth, New Hampshire, was last seen riding in a front seat of an acquaintance car which was northbound on Route 3 in Plymouth. The 21-year-old Merrill allegedly had $13,000 to be used to purchase drugs from the acquaintance. Patrick Miller met the acquaintance previously while hitchhiking from Amherst, Massachusetts to Plymouth. The man, whom police described as a career criminal, was described by Patrick to his friends as a cool guy who could get marijuana for him and his college friends, and trusted the acquaintance who worked as a teacher. According to police investigations, the 21-year-old Merrill met the acquaintance on the evening of April 6, 1987. Merrill had between $6,000 and $13,000 that Merrill and his friends had pooled together to purchase 10 pounds of marijuana. An informant told police the man never intended to sell Merrill the drugs. Instead, he stole the money, murdered Patrick, then dismembered his body and buried him in a remote bog in Proctor, Vermont pond. The informant told police that days after Merrill's disappearance, the man showed him a plastic bottle with palm and feet skin. Police won't discuss the DNA results, but their contention is that the acquaintance murdered 21-year-old Patrick Merrill. Foul play is suspected in Merrill's disappearance, and the acquaintance has yet to be charged with any crime.
Around October 26, 1996, 68-year-old Reginald Leroy Butler, a retired naval architect, was last seen in his hometown of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. 68-year-old Butler designed his own 38-foot sailboat, the Frolic, and set sail alone to Florida for the winter to complete work on his boat. He left Dover Point in October on the boat's first voyage. On November 27, 1996, the Coast Guard discovered the Frolic wrecked on South Carolina jetty. The boat's dinghy was missing, but it's speculated it may have been lost during a storm. After an intensive search involving helicopters and divers, the Coast Guard suspended its search for 68-year-old Reginald Leroy Butler.
Case 5. On July 5, 2000, 40-year-old Curtis Pishon was last seen in Seabrook, New Hampshire at his job as a security guard. Pishon had been a police officer for 10 years before being stricken with multiple sclerosis. The disease limited his mobility and eventually to the point of interfering with his ability to handle his gun. Curtis Pishon was forced to resign as a police officer in an event that his family said devastated him. The 40-year-old Pishon became depressed and withdrawn, moving from job to job before becoming a security guard for an automobile part factory, the Venture Corporation. It was a job that had less physical requirements than a police officer and didn't require him to carry a gun. On July 4th at 9:30 a.m., Curtis arrived at work. According to employees at the time of his arrival and factory supervisors who met with him at midnight, said Pishon was behaving normally and was in good spirits. At 1:42 a.m., firefighters responded to a call by Curtis Pishon. According to the fire department, Pishon's car had caught fire and he attempted to put it out himself with a fire extinguisher before calling. That statement was backed up by evidence of attempts to subdue the fire. Firefighters who talked with Curtis Pishon found him to be very accepting of and not upset by the car fire. It is unknown how the fire in Pishon's car started. Some investigators believe that the fire was started by criminals in order to provide a distraction while they committed a crime. It should be noted that the car contained no signs of arson, accelerants, or accidental ignition. At around 3:20 a.m., after the fire was put out, the security supervisor for the factory talked with 40-year-old Paishan, and he seemed just fine. The supervisor left Paishan at 3:25 a.m. At 3:45 a.m., a worker arriving at the factory noticed that Curtis Paishan wasn't at his station. Around this time, a night shift foreman noticed two vehicles rapidly departing the factory. After Curtis's disappearance was noticed, both the factory and the surrounding area was searched, but nothing was found. Since resigning from the law enforcement, Paishan had a history of depression and alcohol abuse. But Paishan's father said his son was handling things as best as he could based on being on a cheerful mood at the time of his disappearance. The 40-year-old Paishan bought a 9mm handgun from his father just days before his disappearance. The gun was later discovered by Paishan's family as they were clearing out his apartment. There was a theory is that Curtis Paishan decided to simply walk away from his old life. However, due to his crippling physical health and lack of transportation, no taxicab or shipping trucks left the factory during Paishan's shift. It's unlikely Curtis could have gotten far from the factory. There were many of Paishan's belongings that were left at his workplace, including his cigarettes, his packed lunch, his glasses, and his contact lens solution. Since disappearing, there has been no activity on Curtis Paishan's Social Security number, bank account, credit cards, or pension checks. Another investigative avenue that was followed is that Paishan was abducted and probably murdered due to witnessing a crime taking place that night. It's reported that a door and two vending machines in the factory were damaged during Paishan's shift that night. Suspects: Robert E. April, a co-worker of Paishan's, is considered a person of interest in the case. In October 2008, he was arrested for threatening to kill the brother of a man who owed him money. In the threat, Robert April had allegedly said that he killed and buried Curtis Paishan. Robert April has not been charged with or officially connected to Curtis Paishan's disappearance. Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return, we will profile 5 missing female cases from the state of New Hampshire. Be back in a moment.
Welcome to the fire. I hope you're wearing your best clothes. You can't that the end is near. We gotta get away from here.
Welcome back to our MJA podcast, the series Cases from the Deep Freezer. This is episode 8, part 7, The Missing in New Hampshire.
Oh, in the early morning hours of October 4th, 1973, Dorothy Boyce was reported missing to the Nashua Police Department in Nashua, New Hampshire by her husband. 22-year-old Boyce was last seen by her husband as they watched TV. The husband fell asleep around 11:30 p.m., and when he woke up, his 22-year-old wife was gone. A month before Dorothy Boyce disappeared, her husband had filed for divorce against her. The couple had married in 1971 and had a daughter. Daughter was 2 years old when her mother vanished. Dorothy Boyce also had a son by a previous relationship who was raised by her mother. The court later agreed. Oh, hold on.
Okay.
The court later agreed to treat the Boyce's case as an uncontested divorce in light of Dorothy Boyce's disappearance, and the divorce was granted January 29, 1974. 22-year-old Dorothy Boyce was never legally declared dead. Dorothy's mother said that her daughter took no personal belongings with her and that she feared that her daughter was the victim of foul play. The mother was very confident that if Dorothy left on her own, she surely would have contacted someone in the family soon afterward. Police reopened the investigation into Dorothy's disappearance in 2007. Foul play is suspected in her case, which remains unsolved.
Case 7. On June 15, 1977, 28-year-old Edie Segal was last seen in her hometown of Nassau, New Hampshire. Segal lived with a couple who were friends of hers. On the day of her disappearance, Segal borrowed her roommate's light green two-door 1969 Oldsmobile to drive to an exercise class at the Women's World in Merrimack, New Hampshire. Edie Segal never arrived and has never been heard from again. On July 3rd, 1977, over 2 weeks after Segal's disappearance, the Oldsmobile was found abandoned on a logging road in the woods about 1.5 miles off of Wheeler Road in Hollis, New Hampshire. The keys were laying on the road about 150 feet behind the car. There was no sign of Segal at the scene, although some of her belongings were inside the car. Authorities don't believe Segal was the person who parked the vehicle where it was found. They theorize another vehicle followed the Oldsmobile into the woods and 2 or more people left the scene in that vehicle. Edie Segal was born in New Jersey and lived in Tampa, Florida before she moved to New Hampshire just a few months before she vanished. She originally stayed in the 600 block on South Main Street in Nassau before moving in with her friends. 28-year-old Edie was dating 2 local men at the time of her disappearance, but it is unclear whether either of them are considered as suspects in the case. Investigators believe Segal was a homicide victim and may have been buried near where the Oldsmobile was found. Edie Segal was declared legally dead sometime after 1977. Her father is still alive in Florida and still hoping for answers in Segal's disappearance.
On March 22nd, 1980, at around 9 p.m., 15-year-old Rachel Garden was last seen at a Rose Corner Market on Route 108 in Newton, New Hampshire. to buy a pack of cigarettes. After the 15-year-old Garden paid $5 for a pack of cigarettes, she left the store, heading north towards North Main Street. Garden was a regular customer at the store. She was a ninth grade student at Sanborn Regional High at the time of her disappearance. The 15-year-old Garden was the oldest of 4 children. In her free time, Rachel often walked the quarter mile down to Rose Corner Market looking for some excitement. Sometimes she went to the hill across from Maple Avenue, a place where local teens often congregated. Rachel Garden's parents called the police station at about 10 a.m. the next morning to report their child missing. Rachel's mother said that she knew right away something was seriously wrong when Rachel did not return to the family's small Cape home on Main Street. Rachel Garden was considered a runaway by police in the first month after her disappearance. The 15-year-old Garden was described as a headstrong and rebellious teenager, fun-seeking and outspoken. With a population barely over 3,000 people, Newton at the time had only one full-time police officer. Oh my God. Over the years, police investigators have checked numerous leads, including possible sightings, talked with people who knew her, worked with psychics, used dogs, and excavated sites looking for remains. On the night of her disappearance, Rachel was seen talking to 3 male acquaintances in a dark-colored car near Rose Market. The men all had troubled reputations and were involved in criminal activities. One of them later served a prison term for assault and rape. Her parents have consulted psychics and hired private investigators, and nothing turned up. The 15-year-old Garden departed from the store between 9 and 9:30 p.m. and began walking to a friend's house in the 50 block of North Main Street, where she planned to spend the night. Rachel never arrived as scheduled and has not been heard from again. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to Rachel's whereabouts. Shortly after Rachel's disappearance, one of the men allegedly confessed to killing her. Reported confession caused police to dig up the site of Route 108 to look for Rachel's remains, but no evidence was located. It is unknown whether any of the men were actually involved in Rachel's case. Although a voluntary disappearance is still considered a possibility, investigators are now investigating other theories as well, including the possibility of foul play. Rachel Garden's case is classified as a non-family abduction due to the lack of available evidence.
Case 9. On July 13th, 1984, at 9:30 p.m., 15-year-old Shirley McBride was last seen leaving her half-sister's apartment on Union Street in Concord, New Hampshire. McBride was planning to pick up some money from a woman that owed her the money for babysitting, and then she was going to visit her 21-year-old boyfriend at his place of work, which was on Old Turnpike Road near the Merrimack River. It's unclear whether she ever arrived at her boyfriend's workplace. Excuse me here. The 15-year-old McBride has never been heard from again. McBride had a history of leaving home overnight without telling anyone, so she wasn't reporting missing for a couple of days. The 15-year-old did not take any of her personal belongings or clothing with her and did not have any additional cash. Shirley McBride was living with her half-sister Donna and Donna's children at the time of McBride's disappearance. McBride had moved out of her parents' home with their permission a few months before her disappearance. She had begun to have problems in 1983 after her family moved from Manchester, New Hampshire to Pittsfield, New Hampshire. The 15-year-old McBride couldn't make new friends in Pittsfield and was always skipping school and was suspended from school, and she used marijuana. McBride many times visited people at the state prison at the time she vanished. It is unknown whether any of the inmates are connected to her case. The 15-year-old McBride earned spending money by babysitting for local families. Despite her personal problems, Shirley's family does not believe she left on her own willingly. Within a week of her disappearance, McBride's father decided she was probably dead. The father suspected her boyfriend was involved in her case and tracked the man's movements. As a result, Shirley's father was arrested for stalking. The boyfriend has not been ruled out as a person of interest in the case. There were many sightings of Shirley in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York State after her disappearance, but none of the accounts were verified, and police don't believe any of them were McBride. Investigators believe Shirley met with foul play, possibly on the day she disappeared, and that she probably never left the city of Concord, New Hampshire. Another possible suspect is Walter Davis II, from Merrimack, New Hampshire, man who worked in Concord at the time of Shirley's disappearance. Davis had a teenage half sister, and their mother caught him trying to burn some damp clothes, including a denim bib overalls and a stained cotton shirt in a fireplace in July of 1984, the same month Shirley disappeared. Davis reportedly told the women he had raped the girl, thrown her in the Merrimack River, and kept her clothes. His half-sister hid the clothes in a closet and told a friend about what had happened. The friend told the Merrimack police, who retrieved the clothes and questioned Davis and his family. Davis told them that he simply found the clothes on the edge of the White Park Pond in Concord and said he took them home because he thought the overalls might fit his teenage sister. White Park Pond is near McBride's sister Donna's Union Street apartment. Shirley McBride's parents and her sister Donna went to the Merrimack Police Department to look at the overalls and the shirt Davis had tried to burn, and they identified the items as being Shirley's clothing. Merrimack investigators asked Davis to take a lie detector test in Shirley's case, but he refused. Davis died in 2003. The Concord Police Department, which was investigating Shirley's disappearance, didn't learn about the existence of the clothing until 2014. The Concord police took custody of the clothing and at the time said they were going to test it for DNA, but it is unclear whether this was ever done. Shirley McBride's parents had her declared legally dead in 1996, 12 years after her disappearance. McBride's mother died in 2003, her father died in 2015, and her older sister Robin had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Both Robin and Donna hope for answers in Shirley's disappearance. McBride's case remains unsolved. Although this case has not been ruled a homicide, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance would suggest foul play was involved.
On February 9, 2004, 21-year-old UMass Amherst College student Maura Murray disappeared outside of Woodsville, New Hampshire. Miss Murray's car, a black 1996 Saturn with Massachusetts license plates, failed to negotiate a sharp curve and ran off the road, striking a tree. The collision caused her airbags to deploy and a small crack in the windshield. Police say a witness offered to help, but Maura refused and told the witness not to call the police. The witness also told officials that she seemed to be intoxicated but not injured. When emergency workers arrived, Miss Murray had vanished and most of her belongings were left behind in her car. Missing were her cell phone and credit and bank cards, which have not been used since. Police brought out helicopters, ground crews to search the area, and dogs. The investigators couldn't find any footprints left in the snow, and dogs lost her scent about 100 yards away from the crash scene. There were no footprints in the snow around the car and no indications of a struggle. Police believe Mja got a ride from the scene of the accident to parts unknown. Before she disappeared, Mja had called some motels and hotels in the area of Burlington, Vermont, as well as information on condominium rental in Bartlett. Although no reservations over the phone were ever made, Miss Murray also performed a computer MapQuest search. 21-year-old Murray withdrew $280 from an ATM and emailed her professors to tell them she was going home for the week because of a death in the family, but there was no death in the family. Mja has had no contact with family members since her disappearance. Murray's family says it's uncharacteristic of her not to contact them, and they fear she is being held against her will. Mja had not been having problems with her family or her boyfriend at the time she disappeared, and she has no history of mental illness. There is speculation that Mja's case may be related to the disappearance of Brianna Maitland, a girl who vanished from Montgomery, Vermont on March 19, 2004. Miss Maitland is still missing. Montgomery is only about 90 miles from Woodsville, New Hampshire. Miss Murray and Miss Maitland are attractive brunette young women and both disappeared after car accidents in which their cars were left behind with personal items inside. The FBI met with local authorities to discuss possible links between the cases. However, they concluded that despite the apparent similarities, the two female cases were probably not connected to each other. The theory is not being entirely ruled out, but investigators believe it is an unlikely one. Police do not suspect foul play was involved in Mja's disappearance. Both Massachusetts and New Hampshire authorities are investigating the case.
Olivia, is there anything you would like to add to any of these cases?
No, I didn't know how far back these disappearances occurred because I mentioned several times my family and myself and my sibling used to go up there. We had one of those Airstream campers in the 70s, and, we just used to roam around and everything. My dad and I used to go in the woods, and everything. And then, recently I was looking to possibly retire up in southern New Hampshire, and two of the towns that I was looking at you mentioned, so that idea is not going to happen anymore, but just shocking how far back this goes.
Yeah, well, what do you think about the statement from authorities that they don't believe foul play was involved in Miss Murray's disappearance?
That's bullshit.
That's what I said.
No. Well, that's because they screwed up. I'm sorry. They didn't do a proper investigation. Somebody saw somebody. Somebody knows something. We've rehashed this before. What are the odds of three people turning their heads at the same time and this girl disappears? No. It's just, they're just covering for themselves for their own mistakes,
Well, I liked how they put it. They said that she had not contacted any family members. See, that makes people speculate that she did contact someone.
I don't believe Mja is with us anymore. How could she contact her family?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, like I say, no, you're not wrong. It just struck me kind of odd that that's the statement they would put out at the time. And, it just struck me kind of odd. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And, with the history New Hampshire has about girls disappearing and found dead, just the fact that I find disturbing with not only her case but Brianna's, that it's like they left without a trace. There's nothing was found of theirs, no personal belongings, and it's kind of disturbing to say the least.
Okay. I would like to thank Olivia for being on the show tonight. I would also like to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning in, for you all have been so kind. I have a quote for you all. Tears shed for another person is not a sign of weakness. They are a sign of a pure heart. Jose N. Harris. Always remember, folks, that if you ever get bored with nothing to do, well, take a walk deep into the woods. You might be surprised at what you might find. That's the end of our MJA podcast, the series, Cases from the Deep Freezer. This was episode 8, part 7, The Missing in New Hampshire. And we say to all of you, good night from Morrisonville, New York.
I've been walking so long, dreaming you were back home. I forget it down low, high until tomorrow. Come back into the good life, lose these hazy love lies. I've been chasing my mind, lonely in the cold nights. Cause I'm kicking up stones without you, can't pick up the phone without you. I'm a little bit lost without you. I'm taking down homes without you. Can't be on my own without you. I'm a little bit lost without you. Without you. Step out into the dark. Where were you when I was trying to lift up, carry the love? Do you know? I've been closing my eyes. Love me slow, hallucinating, swinging me all of your life. Do you know since I've been walking so long, dreaming you were back home? I forget it down low, high until tomorrow. Come back into the good life, lose these hazy love lies. I've been chasing my mind, lonely in the cold nights. Cause I'm kicking up stones without you, can't pick up the phone without you. I'm a little bit lost without you, without you. I'm taking down homes without you, can't be on my own without you. I'm a little bit lost without you, without you. Hold me close when it's over, life goes slow, loving sober. Feel my bones getting older, sadness grows when you're cold. Cause I am one step heavy and 2 steps high, holding steady with you by my side. 1 step's heavy and 2 steps high, 2 steps high. Cause I'm kicking up stones without you, can't pick up the phone without you. I'm a little bit